Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on supporting sector readiness on the strengthened aged care quality standards. This is ahead of their anticipated introduction from July this year. My name's Janet Anderson. I'm the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commissioner, and I'm chairing today's webinar. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting, wherever you are in Australia, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us for today's webinar. To state the obvious, 2024 is already shaping up to be a very busy year for aged care. We have the expectation of a new Act, new regulatory model, and the topic of today's webinar, new strengthened aged care quality standards. Today, the Commission is releasing for public consultation a suite of draft products to help you, the sector, get ready for the new strengthened standards. Now, I describe them deliberately as draft because what we're doing is looking for your feedback on those products. And we'll talk more about them in the course of this webinar, but we are genuinely interested in hearing from you about how successful we've been in conveying fairly dense, information-rich content in a way which makes sense for you and allows you, whether you're a provider or a user of aged care or a family friend, for you to understand more about what's happening and what's expected under the new standards. Now, one of my colleagues, Lisa Peterson, will be taking us through those products, the draft resources that we've published online today. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but I will draw your attention to one of the resources which is now available, and that is what we call a framework analysis. And this framework analysis provides a comparison of the current standards to the strengthened standards. And I know there would be many providers watching today who are thinking that's a go-to document. It's doing the hard yards for you in comparing what we have now to what we will have in place under the strengthened standards, and drawing out for you in sharp relief those things which are most similar, if not the same, and those things where there's further work required because it is different from the current expectations. So that framework analysis is online, and I recommend it to you. Lisa will have more to say about all of those documents shortly. But what we really want to do is to provide you, the sector, with resources which are clear, practical, and fit for purpose. And where we find ourselves today in releasing these draft resources is having benefited already from the input that many of you have already provided. We have undertaken some targeted consultation to get us this far, and I'm very grateful to all of you who've had a hand in securing this stage of the journey. But at the end of today's webinar, I encourage you to check out the resources and to consider the possibility of giving us feedback about how good they are. Now, there is also an opportunity to provide us with feedback on this webinar, and I'll come to that in a minute. Four key things that we want to cover today: the main changes to the standards, what we at the Commission are doing to support sector readiness. And when I say sector, I'm talking about providers and the people who use aged care and the people surrounding those two key stakeholder groups. An overview, we're going to provide an overview of the resources that we've released for consultation and feedback, and we will also give you details about our consultation process and how you can get involved. Now, I am very pleased to say that I've been joined by a number of experts in this area who will be talking on different aspects of that. Ingrid Leonard's here from the department, Lisa Peterson within the Commission, Pamula, another member of the Commission staff, and joining us for the Q&A session at the end, Emily McGrath from the Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare, and we may end up calling them the Healthcare Commission just for ease of reference, and Simon Christopher, also from the department. Now, you might be asking why we're doing this. Why are we producing draft resources and looking for your feedback? And the answer to my way of thinking is really straightforward, because we want you as providers to be successful in delivering a great aged care experience for every single older person accessing aged care. So as a national regulator, we recognise a responsibility to support older people to understand what they can expect from their aged care experience and what we can do to support them when that experience falls short of their expectations. And also to support providers to understand their obligations and what we expect in the delivery of care, how we will assess performance, and how we will regulate their performance. And thirdly, we want to support workers to understand their obligations, what's important in delivering safe quality care, and how the Commission can help them to raise concerns that they may have with their employer and ultimately with us if that's their preference. All right, a few housekeeping details before we move to the first speaker. You can ask questions at any time. Please just use the question box via the live Q&A tab. I'm reliably advised. I hope that makes sense. We have received a very large number of pre-submitted questions, and we are looking to manage as many of those as possible alongside the ones which may be submitted live. Any that we don't cover today will be picked up broadly in the additional information we continue to put on our website. So please continue to check out our website, be a frequent flyer to our website to continue to glean as much information as you can, because we will continue to be informed by your questions in what we post and in how much detail. But I also commend to you our quality bulletin, to which you can subscribe on our website. There is a short survey at the end of this webinar. I strongly encourage you to stay online to complete it. You will actually find it in the handouts icon on your screen. And that's about it for housekeeping. So let me move without any further delay to our first speaker. Ingrid Leonard is the Assistant Secretary in the Department of Health and Aged Care. And as you know, the department has led the development of the standards and indeed the new Aged Care Act. And Ingrid's going to be talking to us to provide an outline or an overview of the strengthened standards and the next step towards their introduction. Thanks, Ingrid.
Thank you very much, Janet, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here today to talk with you about the strengthened aged care quality standards. So the department has been working closely with the Commission in the development of the strengthened standards. This consultation on the draft guidance is a really important process to ensure the supporting materials are fit for purpose and help to support the transition and implementation of these standards. And I thank you all for your engagement in this process so far. Today, I will briefly cover three things: the current status of the draft strengthened standards, an overview of what's changing, and the department's next steps. So as many of you would be aware, the strengthened standards have been developed following significant consultations since 2021. In December last year, the department published the final draft of the strengthened standards. And this was a really important milestone, as this final draft will inform legislative drafting into the new Aged Care Act. Once this is passed, the strengthened standards will be implemented, and I will cover this a little bit more at the end of my presentation. So the final draft of the strengthened standards incorporated changes following the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission's pilot program and early legislative drafting advice. The main areas that were addressed include improved clarity, usability and auditability, opportunities for reduced duplication and simplified language, and incorporating reference to the new Statement of Rights. So I will now outline the key changes in the strengthened standards compared to the current standards. And certainly this may help you to understand the key concepts and topic areas in the draft guidance. The review of the current standards was driven by the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety, and which recommended enhancements to better support quality care outcomes. This includes strengthened expectations for 5 focus areas, including dementia care, governance, food and nutrition, diversity, and clinical care. In particular, there are now dedicated standards for both food and nutrition and clinical care. So the Royal Commission also recommended enhancing the standards to be more comprehensive, detailed and objective to improve their measurability. Some areas were simplified to improve clarity and assist provider understanding of their obligations, and the structure of the standards has also been enhanced. So each standard now has an intent statement to add content and the expectation statement, which outlines what older people can expect. Each standard also contains several outcomes with an outcome statement and a number of actions. Now, the outcome statements are intended to be the enforceable element of the standards in legislation, with the actions representing what providers may demonstrate to meet the outcome. Overall, the standards have reduced from 8 to 7, and the current standards have 42 requirements, while the new standards have 33 outcomes. So the Commission's suite of documents released today includes a framework analysis, and this maps the requirements of the strengthened standards to current expectations and will help you to understand the changes in more detail. Broadly, the document outlines that a majority of the requirements of the strengthened standards are actually clarifying current expectations, with less than a quarter of the new requirements aligning to current requirements in legislation, and the remaining 10% or so representing new requirements. I know the department consulted on a proposed new regulatory model last year, which will be introduced in line with the New Aged Care Act. A consultation summary report was published in December last year. The core features of the proposed new model include a person-centred rights-based approach, a universal registration requirement to inform and set new obligations for Commonwealth-funded aged care providers, and a new restorative resolution focus for the new complaints model. So under the proposed model, aged care services are grouped into 6 registration categories based on common characteristics and associated service risks, and linked to provider obligations that address those risks. The strengthened standards will apply to providers depending on the registration category that they are in. Provider obligations will apply to registration categories 1 to 3 and will be covered under the new Rights-Based Aged Care Act. Providers in registration categories 4 to 6 will be audited against the new strengthened standards, which will be completed routinely at registration and re-registration. And Lisa Peterson will talk further about this in her presentation shortly. A key focus for the department is the development of the New Aged Care Act, with the exposure draft of the new Act currently out for consultation. The strengthened standards will form an important part of that new Act. Work continues to implement the standards through the Act. This includes translating the outcome statements into subordinate legislation. And as I said earlier, this reflects the intended purpose that the outcome statements will be an enforceable measure. So the department will continue to work collaboratively with the Commission in the lead up to the implementation of the strengthened standards. And this includes supporting this important piece of work to develop the guidance material, as well as development of a communications campaign to ensure the sector are well prepared for the transition. Thanks very much.
No, thank you, Ingrid. That presentation generated a few questions, and we will come back to them after we've heard from a few more panellists. Well done. I'm going to introduce Lisa Peterson now. Lisa is Assistant Commissioner in the Commission, and Lisa's going to talk to us, or talk us through, the suite of products just released as part of our public consultation to help you prepare for the introduction of the standards. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Janet, and hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. So we are absolutely committed to supporting providers and workers and older people and their families and carers to be ready for the changes to the strengthened standards. And as a first step, It's really important for providers to understand how the standards are changing so you can consider what that means for your practice of care. And you've already heard from Janet and Ingrid about the framework that we've just published that compares the existing standards with the strengthened standards. And that's part of the suite of documents that we're releasing today, and it's on our website, so please take a look. The next step for every provider is to be clear about which standards will apply to your service. And this slide builds on the slide that Ingrid just showed you on the registration categories. I want to note that everything we're telling you today is, of course, subject to Parliament passing the legislation. So all the content that we're sharing today is based on the information that's available now. And if there are any changes that come out of the consultation process on the new Act, we'll let you know and we'll update our resources. Now, we know that many providers deliver services across different registration categories. So I want to take a moment just to talk you through how this is going to work in practice, including where an audit will apply as part of registration and re-registration. So a reminder that unlike the current state, in the new world, the standards that apply are not the same for everybody, but depend on your registration category. And you can see which standards apply to the different service categories on the right-hand column of the slide. The key takeaway is that the scope of an audit will be limited to those standards that are relevant to your service type. So let me take you through the examples on the slide. If we start at the top with Type A providers, so for providers that are delivering services in Category 1 to 3, you're not subject to the standards, so there's no audit for these service types. But it's important to know that providers in these categories will need to comply with other conditions of registration and provider obligations under the new Aged Care Act. If we go to the second row, Type B, so this is where you might be delivering services over a combination of 1 to 4. You'll have one provider level audit for your services in Category 4 only, and the scope of that audit will be standards 1 to 4 only. On the next row, this is for providers that are delivering service that cover a combination of categories 1 to 4 and Category 5, which is clinical care. So you will have one provider level audit covering all of your service types in Categories 4 and 5. And that audit will look at standards 1 to 4 for your Cat 4 services, so personal care, and standards 1 to 5 for your clinical care services. For Type D providers, this is where you're delivering a combination of Categories 1 to 5 plus residential aged care. So you'll have one provider level audit for covering all the service types in Category 4 and 5 of I've just described, as well as one audit for each residential care home, and your Resi audits will consider standards 1 to 7. And the last row on the slide, if you're only delivering Resi care or respite care in a residential setting, you'll get one audit for each residential care home that you have. So if you have 2 Resi services, you'll have 2 audits. If you have 50 residential care services, you'll have 50 audits. If I've lost you in any of that, all of this detail is in our audit methodology document, which you can find on the website. But the basic rule is that if the standards don't apply, there's no audit. If you deliver a combination of services, an audit will only apply for those services where the standards apply. And as I mentioned, the audit findings will also inform the Commission's registration and re-registration decisions. And you'll hear a little bit more from Tara shortly about how we're designing our education resources to be tailorable to your different categories of operation. So I want to talk a bit more now about our audit methodology. Because the standards are changing, we also need to change the way that the Commission considers performance against the standard. And you might have already heard about the pilot program that we ran in 2023. So we did 40 pilot audits across 32 providers, and we had services across both Resi and home and community care. We had services in metro, regional, remote and very remote, small to large, with different specialisations and different care needs for the older people receiving care. And a big thank you to everybody that participated. So the purpose of the pilot was really to help us determine how well the draft standard work in practice, to help us to develop the new audit methodology to assess performance against different service types, to help us understand how we can best support providers to understand and comply with the strengthened standards, so what's going to be most useful to you in terms of guidance and tools and so on, And of course, very importantly, how to best support people receiving care and their representatives to understand the standards and what they can expect from their aged care experience. Another really important feature of the pilot audits was to test graded assessment. So in the new world, we will be moving from our current binary pass-fail model, so compliant or non-compliant, to graded assessment across 4 grades. And the value of graded assessment is it provides much more transparency on provider performance and is more helpful in promoting continuous improvement. And our auditors will be grading at both the outcome level, so remember you heard from Ingrid, there are outcomes within each standard, but also at the standard level. And the 4 grades will be conformance, so we're satisfied with performance against the standards, minor non-conformance, so that's where we find some performance issues, but they're not systemic and the relative risks to older people are low, and major non-conformance. So this is where there are significant performance issues. They're likely to be systemic and the risk to older people are high. The 4th grade that we're looking at is exceeding, and we're still working on the framework for this one. So our current thinking is that this would apply where we've got a provider that's achieved conformance against all the standards and can meet some additional criteria too. So stand by to hear a bit more from us on that. As Ingrid mentioned, the pilot from the feedback around how the standards are constructed has already been incorporated into the current version of the standards. And as part of our pilot, we asked providers who participated what they thought. And they told us that they found the process to be more transparent and easier to understand with better. And older people receiving care and their supporters were also positive about the process. So as Janet mentioned, we've got a package of resources to support sector readiness, which we're releasing today for consultation. And the first part of that is the draft standards guidance. So we've published a separate document for each of the standards. And what we've done is to explain your obligations, but also the practical steps that you can take to meet the outcomes of the standards. And it's really important to note that how you apply the guidance will very much depend on the circumstances of your service and the needs of the people that you care for. Where we think that there are different expectations that are specific either to resi or home care, we've included content that is specific to service type. And this is an area where we're really looking for feedback, whether we've done that well enough for you. And you'll see that we've also included content that's specific to role. So we've got content that goes to governing bodies, providers and workers. And we've also published a separate guidance document for workers. And this is intended to bring the standards to life in a simple way with some really practical examples of actions and behaviours that are important in how workers deliver their care. So we developed this draft guidance very much informed by the findings of the pilot audits. We drew on existing commission resources and we had a whole series of workshops, both in person and virtually, with different stakeholders. And as part of those workshops, we had representatives from around 40 aged care providers, again across resi and home care, and about half of that group was involved in the pilot audit. So a big thank you to everyone who was part of that process to help us get where we've got so far. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the Healthcare Commission for their involvement in particularly developing the guidance for Clinical Standard 5. And when you look at the draft guidance, you'll see that there are 3 points of difference in the way that we've presented the information for Clinical Standard 5. So information that's specific to resi or home care has been separated out into a blue box. When you look at the guidance for the other standards, you'll see that we've incorporated into the body of the text where it's applicable. In the clinical governance standard, you'll find that there's an overarching governance body section, and the guidance for the other standards has governing body content for most of the different outcome areas. And then finally, in the clinical guidance, there's guidance content against each of the actions, whereas the guidance for the other standards is aimed at the outcome level, and a reminder that we're auditing at the outcome and standard level. So we're really interested in your views on these different approaches. Have we got the level of detail right? Are the guidance products usable? So very, very keen to get your feedback. The second document that we're sharing with the sector today is our draft evidence mapping framework. So this explains the different types of evidence that our audit team will be looking for when we assess performance against the standards. So our mapping framework consists of 21 themes which link to the 33 outcomes in the strengthened standards, and it provides a range of reflective questions. So the sort of questions that our audit team might ask your governing body or your workers or the older people that you care for. And it also provides examples of the evidence that could be presented in the audit. So the intention here is that you can look at this together with the audit methodology and the guidance material to help you understand how you can demonstrate conformance with the strengthened standards. And really keen to get your views about this document. It may be that you can think of other ways that you would demonstrate performance that we should include. We'd love to hear them. The next piece is our draft audit methodology, and this explains how the audit process is going to work under the new standards. Now, the purpose of audit in the new regulatory framework is very much focused on promoting continuous improvement and will also inform re-registration decisions. Of course, if we find risk during an audit, we won't walk past it. Our monitoring program, though, is our primary tool for identifying provider risk. So a couple of key changes in our audit methodology I want to tell you about. Firstly, we've got a new step where we make a request for information from the provider ahead of going on site. So the purpose here is to gather information that helps us to understand providers and to access and review evidence that we can consider off-site. We've introduced a meeting with governing bodies and senior executive early in the audit process, and this is part of our evidence gathering process around provider governance, but it also gives governing bodies the opportunity to talk about things they'd like us to understand, and that might include telling us about what's going well, examples of innovative practice, as well as raising issues around challenges and risks and how these are being managed. We're using a digital audit tool to gather evidence which gives transparency for all parties during the audit process. And we've got a new step that gives providers the opportunity to review and comment on audit outcomes before the results are finalised. And that one went down very well in the pilot. So we're testing our draft methodology a little further with some providers over the coming weeks, and we might make a few tweaks or refinements to the process. I also want to say that one of the things we're thinking about in how we assess performance is that it's important that we take a holistic view and a really consistent approach to how we look at all provider obligations. So once those are finalised under the new Aged Care Act, we might need to make some further adjustment to our audit process, to make sure that it aligns with related obligations, and that'll make sure that we're regulating all obligations consistently. And the draft request for information that I mentioned earlier sets out the information that providers will need to send to the Commission as that first step in the audit process. And you'll see that we've got one document for services in categories 4 and 5, so personal care and clinical care, and a different RFI for Resi service. We've also got a pre-audit preparation tool, and this provides information to help providers to assess their own performance and work on continuing. And we'll be asking providers to complete this as part of the audit process. And I want to say that both the request for information and the pre-audit preparation tool are really aimed at enhancing your participation and your agency in the evidence that you present to us, to our audit teams about your systems and processes before we commence work on site. So we really want to hear from you on these tools. Are they practical? Have we missed anything? And finally, the last document that's out there today is a glossary of terms. So that gives you definitions of the different terms that we use in the standards and across our resources. It's really important to us that we hear your voice as we develop these products, and this will make sure that help us to make sure that you've got the right resources and the information that you need to prepare for the changes that are coming. I'll stop there. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you, Lisa. A lot of information conveyed very succinctly, and I'm sure there will be questions that I will send your way in the Q&A section. But before we get there, we have another speaker, and then I'll invite Pamula to talk to us about the consultation process on the guidance resources and how you can help us to ensure that they are fit for purpose and delivering the information in a way which is going to make you successful. Thanks, Tara.
Thanks, Janet, and welcome everybody again. As we've already said, the Commission really wants to hear from you about the draft guidance products we've released and the resources that you need to support the delivery of quality aged care to meet the strengthened standards. The pack of draft resources outlined by Lisa is now published on our website. There are 6 resources currently available for feedback that include the standards guidance and worker guidance, the evidence mapping framework, the audit methodology, the pre-audit preparation tool, the request for information, and the glossary of terms. We'll also be soon publishing other draft resources specifically for older people and their family members, so watch out for that. You can access all of the draft documents from the link and the QR code that you can see on your screen now. We've also released a set of consultation questions to guide your feedback about these documents, and we really want to hear from you. Your feedback will help us to understand what works well in draft resources and what else you might need to support conformance with the strengthened standards. At the end of the consultation process, we'll publish a report outlining what we heard, the changes we made, and some statistics on responses. So the consultation process opens today and will close on the 30th of April 2024. In addition to the public consultation, we'll also be conducting some targeted consultations. We've already had a chance to speak to a group of providers through one of ACPA's special interest groups, and we'll continue to reach out through stakeholders to identify people who want to be part of these consultations. We'll also be undertaking target engagement with specific provider groups because we know one size doesn't fit all. And we also want to do some specific work with providers delivering care in remote and rural locations. We'll also be engaging with older people and their peak bodies, workers and their representatives, and special interest groups to ensure that all parts of the sector are aware of the consultation and can have their voices heard. And we'll be running some specific forums with a range of provider and care recipient cohorts to give them an opportunity to provide feedback to the Commission on the guidance products and to understand how applicable they are and any suggested additional resources that you might need. If you're interested in being part of these targeted consultations, please email us at engagement@agedcarequality, or one word, .gov.au. The email address and the QR code for the resources will be shown at the end of this presentation. We're also planning to do some work with specialist agencies to assist us to develop resources and materials for First Nations and culturally and linguistically diverse providers, workers, older people, and their communities. If you're interested in having input into the development and testing of these new resources, please email us at the same address. We'd love to hear from you. We'll also be calling for interested people to join a co-design group to develop and refine education and support resources for the sector. As I mentioned earlier, we'll also be shortly releasing a new resource for older people that outlines what the new standards will mean for people receiving care, so please keep your eye out for that. It'll be on our website. We'll continue to share information on the consultation process through our normal channels, such as the Quality Bulletin, conferences and events, other forums, and of course our website. We are genuinely looking forward to hearing from the sector because it really is about how we all work together to deliver better aged care. So I just want to touch on how we'll make the final guidance products available to aged care providers. Last year, the Commission worked with some external experts to explore what the sector needs from our guidance products and how you want them to be presented. As part of that process, providers, workers and care recipients told us that we need to make it as easy as possible for people in the sector to access the guidance and understand how it relates to them. We were told that with the amount of change that's happening this year, it's really important that we help focus on what's new and what's changed. And you told us that we need to prioritise accessibility and simplicity in the content that we provide. We were also told that about half of our audience wants guidance in a form they can print out in hard copy, and the other half want content to be available online so they can access it through their various devices. To meet those needs, we're developing a digital guidance tool, which I'm very excited about. Using the tool, you'll be able to go to the Commission's website, quickly enter some information about your preferences, service type and role, and you'll be able to then be delivered curated information that's relevant to you that you can also print out in a personalised PDF fashion. We'll be working closely with providers as we develop this guidance tool to make sure that it's easy to use and navigate and ultimately supports you in delivering a great aged care experience and meeting the requirements of the strengthened standards. Back to you, Janet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tara. And that concludes our presentations, which means it's time for our question and answers. And there are a lot of them, and I'll do my best to get through as many of them as possible. Ingrid, I'm going to start with you. We've had a couple in relation to the standards. One asks why or how the current strengthened standards should be understood, given that we don't yet have the Act. And are we still dealing with a draft? And if so, what's the chance that they're going to be changed again when the Act is introduced?
Thanks very much, Janet. So the new standards have been signed off by government. The reason why they're referred to as a draft is that they are now in the process of being translated into legislation. And it might be that through that process, there are some minor amendments to the wording to enable that legislative drafting process to be finalised. The department published the final draft of the strengthened standards in December, and the intention was to really provide the sector with visibility in advance of the commencement, which is expected to be with the new Aged Care Act. So thanks, Janet. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Another one, if I may. There are a few questions in relation to how the strengthened standards speak to the standards that apply for disability services and supports under NDIS. I'm fairly confident the department had close regard to that in the development process. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Sure, thank you. So that's absolutely right, Janet. The structure of the strengthened standards has been changed to be more aligned with the way the NDIS standards are structured, including in design and regulatory approach. Certainly the content is different, recognising the differences between aged care and disability support expectations. But the new structure uses sort of a modular approach to better identify which strengthened standards apply to particular aged care service types.
Okay, all right, that's useful. There may be other questions that flow, but that's a useful rendering of it. Okay, I have some questions here about deeming. Simon, are you up for those? What is the arrangement that will apply on commencement of the new Act and therefore the new standards? This notion of deeming has been talked about. It's included in the consultation documentation, obviously. How much do we know, and what can you share with the webinar participants today?
Thanks very much for the question, Janet. So a couple of things in there. The department holds the role as system governor, and within the exposure draft will be undertaking the deeming arrangements. They will be in place to ensure that service delivery continues from the movement of one model to the next. So on commencement of the new Aged Care Act, that will be a seamless process whereby the services you were delivering on the 30th of June, you will be able to deliver the same services on the 1st of July. We are intending to come out to talk to providers about that process and about what registration categories you will be deemed into, but largely and broadly it will be reflective of the services that you currently deliver, in line with the excellent presentation that Lisa gave you in relation to those service types within those registration categories. I think that's probably it in a nutshell, but we will be out in mid-March to start to talk to that process. But further to that, Janet, we'll be starting to unpack the obligations that apply to each of those registration categories with providers. Okay.
Well, this one's probably for you or Lisa, but given that your mic is open, I'll keep you on screen. We've had a question from, I'm assuming, a Commonwealth Home Support Program service provider, and they're wondering whether the standards will apply to them. Can you just unpack that a bit to clarify as best we can at this stage what our expectation is?
Happy to. So that the deeming process will allocate based on your service types you are delivering in line with your current funding and continuing funding agreements. We'll allocate you or deem you into those registration categories. And as Lisa pointed out, if it's in categories 4 to 6 or any combination of 4 to 6, the standards will apply to those particular registration categories. And outside of that, there may be specific obligations that apply to categories registration categories 1 to 3 that will manage specific risks within those registration categories.
Okay, thank you. Tara, one for you. There is what I assume to be a home care provider who's anxious and is making a comment, which I think is well-founded, that arguably home care providers need a lot more support to understand the new requirements, the actions and the outcomes within the new standards, and particularly in the sense that they are different from the standards that are in place now. Can you just talk to us briefly about the way in which we in the Commission have understood that there is a difference in the various target groups, and we're trying as far as possible to ensure that the message and the content and the form of presentation is fit for the consumers, the people using that information and resource?
Thanks, Janet. So if you were to have a look at any of the guidance standards documents, what you'll see is that we've tried to separate it out. So there's already content in there specific for home care providers, resi providers, etc. What we're talking about with the digital guidance tool, which is really where I think it all comes together, is for a person to be able to log onto the website and say, I'm a governing person of a home care service and I'm interested in standard 3, and it will deliver information relevant and specific to the home care space, including with examples relevant to the home care space. So we did hear really loudly through the paper giant work that we needed to do better and do more in this space to differentiate and be clearer about things. And that's the journey that we're on. So I would be very keen to hear from any of these people if we've hit that mark, because we've actively tried to work to do exactly that.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? We really want to hear from providers. Have we nailed it, or is there some other way of presenting that information which would make it more accessible and understandable, for example, by a particular sector of the market? Okay, that's really useful. All right, Lisa, I've got some for you. I'll field the first and then send some of the others in your direction. There's a question we do get quite often, which is there a grace period? Will there be a transition arrangement? Or do the standards come into play immediately the new Act is passed? Now, the answer is we don't have any latitude we can exercise. There's no discretion available to us. The standards will be part of the new Act. The new Act comes into place, is proclaimed to commence on a particular day, and the standards are live and active from that day. Now, that should be understood from a regulatory perspective as an expectation that providers are compliant from day one. But there's a but there. If you can demonstrate to us that you have studied hard, that you have processes underway which haven't yet reached completion, that you understand risk and you have a really robust method and practice in managing risk so that the quality and safety of the care you're delivering is where it should be, then we will support your continued journey towards full implementation. In other words, you're not going to get into serious trouble from the regulator if you are falling short of the mark, but you are doing your level best to address whatever that shortcoming might be. We do expect you to familiarise yourself with the new standards, to understand the difference between where you are and where you need to be performing under the new standards, and to have in place the effort, the actions, including the staff training and the development of procedures and protocols, whatever it might look like. All of that is underway. If you haven't fully secured all of that and landed where you know you want to land, but you are managing all your risks and delivering safe quality care with that, which is meeting the needs of the people to whom you're delivering care, then you won't get into serious trouble. We will cheer you on. We will watch you. And the minute we see you veering off track and risk is escalating and people receiving care are being placed at risk of harm, we will become far more intensive in our engagement with you, because that's our job. And older people in Australia expect no less of us than that. But if you're managing risks then we will assist you in that journey towards full compliance. So please understand that. And that's the reason we're talking with you today, because we have a shared goal. We want every older Australian accessing care to have an amazing experience of that care, to be safe, to have an enhanced quality of life from that care experience. And we want you to get there. We want you to be successful. Now, Lisa, I've got some other and more technical questions. So let me fire a few of them at you. Will the outcomes of an audit be published?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. Thank you, Janet. We anticipate that they will. We're still working through the detail of exactly what that might look like, including how audit outcomes will contribute to the star ratings. But what I can say is that we think that everybody is best served by there being transparency around audit outcomes for both providers and for older people receiving care.
Okay, thank you. There's a really interesting question here from someone. Should we undertake a self-assessment using the current standards or using the new standards? And when will a revised self-assessment tool be released? So 2 questions there.
Yeah, thank you. So the self-assessment tool, the pre-audit tool that I mentioned earlier, that's now available on our website. And I'd be recommending that you have a look at that one, because part of the reason that we are releasing all of this content right now, our most important mission is to get your feedback, but it also gives providers and some early insights into our thinking about how we're going to, what good looks like in the new world and what we'll be expecting from providers. So I would really encourage you, everybody, to have a look at that self-assessment tool as part of your own internal readiness testing for the strengthened standards.
Okay. There's another one here that I'm reaching for, self-assessment. There's a question about our audit methodology, and you may end up pointing people to the resource to see whether that does the job. But I wonder whether you could give an overarching perspective in response to this question. What approach will we take as a Commission to assessing the new standards, considering that there is so much more detail in the strengthened standards? They're curious about our methodology and how we're going to manage it, given that the architecture, the composition of the strengthened standards is actually quite different from the current standards.
Yeah, look, that is a really good question, and something that we've been thinking really hard about. I think part of the answer to that is that, as I described to you, in the audit methodology process going forward, once the strengthened standards come into play, we won't be doing all of our work on site. So there's that process where we ask you, and when you have a chance to look at the request for information, you'll see it's pretty detailed, because we're really keen to learn as much about you and about your systems and processes as we can before we get on site. It's better for us because it means that we come informed by an understanding of who you are and how things work, and hopefully also better for providers, because it means the time that our people are on site is spent doing the things that they actually need to be on site for. So, speaking with aged care workers and older people receiving care and so on. So, as Janet says, the audit methodology document is a really great place to have a look. And I think the other thing that will help you get a sense of this is also the evidence framework, because that gives you a sense of the kind of things that we're going to be looking for as part of our audit process. Thanks, Jane.
Okay. Tara, another one for you, which I've now lost. There's a question which I hope is from somebody currently accessing aged care. And the question is, what is the government doing to make sure consumers are aware of the new standards and what they mean?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. Great question. As I said earlier in the presentation, we are looking to develop some specific information for aged care recipients, their families and communities. That's coming, and we anticipate that will be soon. And the purpose of that is really to help people accessing services understand what the new standards mean in practice and what does that mean for the care that they get every single day. So we'll be looking to do that across a range of media and resources. So we're looking for innovative ways to deliver those messages, whether it's short videos or fact sheets. And we're also looking at how we can expand our reach in making sure that we get more to the people who are receiving care or their families. So we're looking at increasing our channels, looking at things like using local councils and libraries, the visits that we do to services, the new consumer reference bodies. We're looking to tap into a whole range of ways that we can help push this information out so that people are really aware that there are new standards and what does it mean for them.
Cool. Okay, that's very useful. Thank you. Lisa, another one from you, and I know this will be from a provider. Will we continue to give notice of visits when we undertake an audit, or will they? Will they continue to be unannounced, or will we give notice?
Yeah, thanks very much, Janet. So the detail of the timing and some of the processes we're still working through and yet to be settled. But what I can say is the audit process starts with that request for information and a conversation with the provider. So from that perspective, there is there is an engagement step that happens at the beginning of the audit process, remembering that in the future state, our audit process is a mix of requesting information from you, which you send to us and we review. It's virtual interviews with governing persons and senior staff, and it's on-site activity. So it's a mix of all of those things. So we'll be able to articulate with a bit more clarity for you what the timing of those different and the arrangements associated with those different steps are. It's one of the things that we're looking for. I mentioned that we are still testing our methodology with a number of providers over the next little while, and that'll be one of the outcomes of that process, and we'll update everybody when we've landed that.
Okay, thank you. Another one for you, Lisa, with your microphone open. And this is an important one that I know a number of people will be wondering about. What happens in the circumstance where a provider has existing non-compliance and we cross over into the new Act, the new standards? How will we manage that? What can the provider realistically expect from us as a regulator, given that there are new rules applying, but they were found non-compliant under the old rules, as it were?
Yeah, sure. That's a really great question. So there will be, as part of the new Act legislation, there'll be what we would call transition arrangements, which will set out the rules in detail about how these things are going to work. But the bottom line is that the current state doesn't disappear overnight just because a new Act comes into place. So that if we are working with a provider on a complaint or a compliance matter or a SIRS notification matter, that process won't stop. If we're working with you on that in June, it won't stop on 1 July. But the detail around how the transition arrangements will work more broadly will be part of the legislation. But as I said, if there's a tail of activity that is still in place as the new Act comes into being, we'd be working with you to finalise those processes and bring them to completion.
Okay, and we'll obviously it'll be a no surprises arrangement. Yeah. We're working closely with the provider to ensure that everyone is clear what's the expectation and the timetable attached to that. Great, okay. Emily, I'm going to bring you in here. The Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare, also known as the Healthcare Commission, was responsible for the drafting of the new clinical standard, Standard 5. And the question is, to what extent did you have reference to documents which exist in the healthcare system, guides and principles that apply in health services in developing the iterations, the drafts that preceded the published version that we have in front of us now?
Thanks, Janet. Yes, we use at the Commission, we have the National Safety and Quality Health Service Standards, and we use those to inform the development of Standard 5, but we're also very aware that there's not a direct translation from acute care to aged care. So there are a number of other documents, aside from those mentioned, that are probably more appropriate to aged care. So we've got the Guiding Principles for Medication Management for Aged Care, the electronic national residential medication chart, serious incident response scheme, those sorts of guidelines and documents that assisted us in drafting the clinical care standard. And we're also working on further resources to support aged care providers in key areas of risk, such as transitions of care and medication management, clinical information systems, and so on.
Okay, thank you. Question for either you or Lisa. I'll go to Lisa because she answered one similar to this earlier. There's a question about how home care providers will be expected to implement Standard 5 when the care at home is different from the care that's provided in a residential setting. Now, you know, the full answer to that may take longer than we have, but I'm sure you'll be able to address it at a level of principle, and then we can provide further guidance through the documents that we've provided and other published information.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. So I think the answer to this is that in all cases, what providers will need to do will be informed by the service that they offer and by the care needs of the people that they care for. I won't try and get into the detail around Standard 5, noting that we don't have much time left, but we have tried to address that in the guidance information that sits within Standard 5. So please take a look at that and tell us if we've made it clear or if it's still fuzzy or if there are things that we haven't addressed that we should. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. Tara, the time frame for consultation, can you just set out for us again to remind people how they access the documents, what we're looking for from them, and how long they have to give us some feedback, please?
Yeah, so the guidance documents that have been published today are available on our website, and if you go to the Aged Care Quality Safety website, they're on the very banner across the top, so you absolutely can't miss them, or you can use the QR code that will come up on screen. The consultation process is open now, and it will be open until the 30th of April, noting that we will continue to engage and work with the sector across a range of different existing engagement opportunities to make sure that we're doing what we can to support the sector and responding to needs like we do for all of the things that we've got. So though you've got any time between now and 30th of April to fill in the survey or to email us if you want to be part of other targeted engagements that we've got on offer to test things. So yeah, we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. I might wrap things up at this point. I have a few closing comments to make, so please don't reach for your mouse. Just allow me a couple of minutes. First of all, I want to thank my panel members, Ingrid, Emily, Simon, Lisa, Tara, for joining me today. I am blessed with subject matter experts, and I think they've done a great job in communicating some fairly detailed information in a fairly short space of time. But of course, you can visit our website, visit the department's website as well to get any further information, and particularly the documents that we're releasing today. I do want to remind you to complete the short survey at the conclusion of this webinar so that we can get your feedback on the actual event, not just the documents that we've published, but how we did over the last hour. We do genuinely look carefully through all of the feedback we receive to these surveys. I say that hand on heart. We learn from it. We refine our presentation, our approach. It even informs the topics that we choose that you might want to hear from us about. So please take that opportunity to let us know what you think. A recording of this session will be available on our website, so recommend it to others if they weren't able to join us today, or watch it again if there are parts that you may have missed and wanted to recover. And the final comment I have to make is as follows. Take a deep breath, everyone. There is a lot of change on hand, new act, strengthened standards, new regulatory model. We understand it. We're in the middle of it too. And as I said earlier, we've got the same goal. We want every single older person accessing aged care to have an awesome experience of that care. So we're reaching for the same outcome. We will support you to understand what you need to do, or if you're a consumer, to understand what you can reasonably expect. And we'll give you the tools to get there. And we will, if you're a provider, we will regulate you and hold you to account for your performance. And if you're trying hard and successfully managing risk and delivering safe, quality care that's meeting the needs of the people for whom you have responsibility, then we will cheer you on. So give us feedback on our resources. We look forward to hearing from as many of you as possible, because we do want to make them as good as they can be to assist you to perform and deliver amazing aged care to Australians across the country. Thank you everyone for participating. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.